All right. Welcome, North Carolina, to our webinar today titled Treating Loved Ones of Individuals Experiencing Gambling Problems. My name is Robbie Fuqua, and I will again be your host today. And we are happy to bring back and feature Dr. Lori Rugle, who is a subject matter expert on just not problem gambling, but mindfulness and a whole lot of other things. So we're so happy to bring Dr. Rugle on. And before I do a formal introduction, I do want to give you some training updates, and then we'll turn it over to Dr. Rugle for her talk today. So as far as training, let's first start with webinars. What a great month we've had, right? Starting with Dan Trillero, who spoke June 1st on the disease of problem gambling. Then I spoke on SBIRT, and then we had Julie Hines come in and talk on prevention. Yeah, and then Brianne Dorr from the NCPG, who spoke on legislation last week and problem gambling. So it's just been a great month, and we'd like to thank the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services for making all this possible. Amanda, thank you. And in fact, we're working with her now. And I'd like to thank the University of North Carolina School of Social Work. Thank you, Jamesia and Tara, for working with us to make all this happen as well. But we are working on, and you probably saw through the emails, we've got a new slate of folks coming in, new speakers. We're bringing back old speakers. You're even giving me a chance to talk again. So starting next week, we've got, July 9th. Is that next week already? Dr. Paul Lanier will be speaking on ACEs on July 9th, and then July 23rd, it will be Dr. David Ledgerwood, who we're happy to bring back, who's going to be speaking on motivational interviewing and CBT. Now, as far as our Sure Bet, if you're new to the call, by the way, welcome. We would like to welcome everybody, and we have the name of our company is Morneau Chappelle, and we manage several problem gambling helplines. One, we collaborate with managing with the Department of Health and Human Services here in North Carolina for the North Carolina Problem Gambling Helpline. Part of what we do are these training series, and we do a face-to-face workshop called Sure Bet. Usually I'm on the road doing Sure Bet. And I can honestly say, and I didn't think I would say this, I wish I was doing business travel right now. But unfortunately, with what's happening in our world today, it's best to stay safe and adhere to all the state and local laws to, not have the meetings and not to travel. So we're going to do the Sure Bet series online. I'm working on it right now. We're transferring the face-to-face workshop into starting in September, Sure Bet 1. I'm going to have some solid dates for you, I promise, coming very soon. But we are going to be doing Zoom on Sure Bets 1 and Sure Bet 2 series in 3-hour segments. So the Sure Bet 1 will be 4 segments, 3 hours, and we look forward to presenting that to you. But I'll give you some solid dates soon, okay? And by the way, before we get going here, please go to the UNC Behavioral Health Springboard website to register for any of the upcoming trainings that I'm talking on now, the webinars, or even the online Sure Bet series that we're going to be hopefully soon let you know those dates on. Okay, so as far as today's call, if you guys have any questions, please chat us just as we've done in all the calls. Also, you can use the Q&A platform here on Zoom or raise your hand. So we will try to get to those questions. If for some reason we are unable to, we will make sure to try to get you the answer via email. Yeah, so chat us. Use the Q&A, do whatever you need to let us know that you have a question or something to say on the subject today. The other thing I'd like to say, we welcome all the folks who've dialed in on the phone. Just to let you know, unfortunately, if you dial in, of course, we welcome everybody, but you won't get your CEU credit. In order to do that, you have to go through the website, to go through the Zoom platform, because we want to make sure that you're able to ask questions and chat and do all those great things. Okay. All right, so without further ado, Dr. Lori Rugle, she brings 35 years of experience to the field of problem and responsible gambling, including treatment, prevention, research, and responsible gambling to her current positions. She has managed problem gambling programs within the Veterans Administration, in the private sector and within state systems. She's participated in research on brief screening for gambling problems, as well as a broad range of other problem gambling related research projects. She's provided consultation and training on gambling disorder throughout the United States for the military and internationally. She has worked as a responsible gambling specialist with the North American Association of State and Provincial Lotteries. She is an assistant professor at the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Maryland, a special projects consultant with the Maryland Center of Excellence on Problem Gambling. And last year in Denver, I was there, I saw it. Dr. Rugle, you received the Dr. Custer Lifetime Award for Direct Service, awarded by the NCPG. So again, we welcome you, Dr. Rugle, and I will shut up now and let you go.
Thanks so much, Robbie, and thanks for everyone for being in attendance here. This is a really critically important topic when treating folks with a gambling disorder. How do we involve the families? How do we address the needs of the loved ones? And how do we keep people safe throughout that process? So this is a very quick run through a topic that we could spend weeks on in terms of clinically addressing the needs of loved ones. So let's get going here. Whoop. It won't go backwards for me. Okay, I don't know why it won't do that.
Is it not going? Let's see here.
It will only go forwards. Let me try. There we go.
Cool. Okay.
Okay. That works. Okay. Let me take a breath and de-stress my moment of panic here.
You're okay.
So there is amazingly little research on how to help families in relationship with somebody who has a gambling disorder. And what research there is has largely focused on, well, what's the impact? You know, and we pretty well know that there's a financial impact. There may be other addictive disorders in the family, other mental health disorders that get exacerbated by the gambling issue in the family. Certainly, we've learned that there are high rates of conflict and violence in families who have somebody with a gambling disorder in the family. Child abuse is significantly higher. Domestic and intimate partner violence is higher, and it goes both ways. The person with the gambling disorder may be the perpetrator of the violence, or the family member may be the perpetrator of the violence in these very stressful living situations. So an important thing to assess for us, we'll talk about feelings of hopelessness, anxiety, isolation, often seen more in women than men, and men concerned with the impact on their jobs of having a loved one who may have a gambling problem. Obsessive compulsive symptoms come out of the worry, the tracking, the monitoring, the wondering, you know, making sure the money's where it needs to be, and a whole range of physical problems for the family members as well as the person with the gambling disorder. And while we'll focus mostly today on adults in relationship to somebody with a gambling disorder, we can't forget that the same impacts are felt by children in these households. So what does a family member or loved one want? And quite often, the family member may be the first person reaching out, calling a helpline. How do I get treatment for my loved one? You know, and they don't come in saying, how do I get help for myself? How do I get my loved one into treatment? How do I get my loved one to go to Gamblers Anonymous? How do I get my loved one to stop gambling, to be responsible, to stop lying? So we have to start with where the family member is at. Their concerns about changing their loved one, getting this problematic behavior out of the family, and perhaps gradually move them towards thinking about how can they help themselves. And that's a often slow motivational shift, and we can't move there too quickly before the family is ready to look at, well, I may not be able to do anything about my loved one's behavior, but I can make this life more palatable, easier, more endurable, more tolerable for myself. That's something I can do something about, which is empowering. So where do we begin? As I've alluded to already, the safety issues have to be very seriously attended to. And not only are there high rates of suicidality among folks who have a gambling disorder, but there may be suicidality issues among family members. So that first safety issue must always be assessed for. And then safety in terms of, do you feel physically safe in this relationship, in this living environment? Are the children safe? And then the financial safety. Are you financially safe? Does your family have their financial needs taken care of, protected? And there's that interplay with financial safety and physical safety. I may feel physically safe, but if I try to get money for the family's needs, then that shifts the balance. Trying to get money away from somebody who has a gambling problem may be a very volatile situation, which may lead to physical violence. Or if there's somebody with a gambling disorder and they're being told you have to tell your family member about all the money that isn't in the savings account or the mortgage that hasn't been paid, that also can be a very dangerous situation for the person with a gambling disorder. So all those interconnections to assess for in terms of emotional, physical, financial safety. And of course, with the client's priorities, starting with where the client is at. What are your priorities? And again, as we've mentioned, can I promise you that we can address those? I can't promise that we can get your loved one with a gambling disorder into treatment. But we can talk about things you might be able to do to create an environment in which your loved one may be more likely to think about change and think about addressing their problematic behaviors. And what are the strengths? A strength-based assessment. What are the strengths within the family system? And a whole separate topic that we could spend a good chunk of time on is, when do you involve the family? And how do you involve the family? You know, so if somebody comes in with a gambling disorder, do you wait? Well, it's what the client is ready for, but you always put out there, my preference is put it out there as soon as possible. As part of the way I do treatment, I really like to involve family members. How would you like to do that? Very matter-of-factly, very non-judgmentally. You know, I'd really like to call your family member and invite them in. How would you like that to happen? How can I help them understand the meaning of gambling in your life and in the life of the family? How can I help you meet your family's needs and address their concerns? Would you like to do that together? Would you like me to talk to the family separately? And here are the rules and the guidelines. You know, I don't want to be the secret keeper. So if you tell me something and we're working together with the family and you don't want the family to know, that's a very difficult situation. Let's agree that we will work on helping you tell your family member important pieces of information. And we'll take 3 sessions to do that, or whatever that is, but making it real clear up front that being pickle in the middle isn't usually a helpful way of doing counseling. And do you see the family together? Do you see them separately? It's often helpful to do both. Sometimes family members feel constrained about what they're willing to tell you in front of a person with a gambling disorder, or the other way around. So a little bit of both is helpful. And I've learned over the years to be kinder to myself. So my expectations of what is successful have kind of gone down over the years. So my goal is to have at least one session that involves some family members, just to get a feeling of what's going on with the family, in the relationship, in a way that meets the client's needs and their preferences in terms of together or apart. So at least one assessment to get a better sense from the family members themselves about how this behavior is impacting them and the family. So a very quick through some of those basics. So finances are often one of the primary issues for both the person with a gambling disorder and the family member. And it's important to talk about mindful money protection planning. How can we as a couple or we as a family come together and support each other to develop the best plan to protect all of our money from out of control gambling, from the risk of gambling getting out of control? So we're aligning ourselves together against a common enemy, which is gambling or out of control gambling. It can be helpful for families and for someone with a gambling disorder to know, what are the legal issues? What might family members be liable for legally? If there have been inaccuracies in income tax reporting and a family member has signed those income tax documents, is the family member liable for any legal consequences? So, knowing how to connect with resources that can help sort out what legal issues may involve the family as well as a person with a gambling disorder. We've talked about the safety issues around talking about money. Getting in between somebody with a gambling disorder and money can be extremely dangerous, even life-threatening. So go very cautiously and know, if you refer somebody to Gam-Anon, what they may likely hear from that group, who may not be as keenly aware of the safety issues. Will they be told, oh, you got to get that money out of the person with the gambling disorder's hands? Well, maybe not if there are safety issues involved. So those always have to be assessed first in talking about protecting money from the gambling. And what is the best way, whether or not your loved one is in treatment or wants to control or modify or stop their gambling behaviors? How can we figure out how you can do that for yourself and the family without risking unnecessarily safety issues? Safety first, and then money protection planning for the loved one, hopefully with the involvement of the person with the gambling disorder, but sometimes without their involvement. So lots of baseline issues to sort out in coming up with a family-oriented money protection plan. So, very quickly gone through some really important issues that could be day-long trainings in and of themselves. And what I wanted to get to is an approach and a strategy for thinking about how to work with families in perhaps a little bit different way than has been the norm in traditional addictions treatments. And this is based on an approach, a community reinforcement and family training approach that has focused on how to work with families of individuals, primarily with substance use disorders. But it translates very readily into working with somebody with a gambling disorder. And as we've been talking, they have, outlined the steps. First, safety, taking domestic violence precautions, then developing in the family members, in the loved ones, a deeper understanding of what gambling may be about for their loved one. Not to excuse it, not to permit it, but to gain empowerment in how do I approach this issue with my loved one. Learning skills, including communication skills, in a deeper way than just assertiveness training has always been. How to understand my interaction with this person in terms of what do I reinforce, using positive reinforcement to respond to recovery-oriented or non-gambling behaviors, and using time out from this positive reinforcement in response to gambling behaviors, and allowing the individual with the gambling disorder to deal with the natural consequences of their gambling behaviors without necessarily stepping in and relieving themselves of that capacity. And then looking at myself as a family member, how do I reinforce myself? How do I care for myself? And how do I reinforce, the non-gambling behaviors? And then how do I look for and take advantage of any opportunities to present the option to my loved one of becoming engaged in treatment or self-help? So multiple steps that we'll go through and get a sense of, and how those may differ from traditional approaches. And as we've already talked about, it may be an ideal goal for the person with a gambling disorder to get involved in help in some way, self-help or treatment, but there aren't any guarantees, and we need to be clear up front. Not a bait and switch, yes, we can get your loved one into treatment, and I'll get you involved in the meantime. That's an ideal goal, and we can work towards that and look at ways to increase that likelihood, but there aren't any guarantees. In the meantime, if this interests you, we can help you meet your own needs better and live more comfortably with the presence of this gambling disorder in the family, and look at ways to create that environment, just as we in counseling create an environment in which change is most likely to happen. We can teach family members to create that same kind of space and environment within the family. We don't have to keep these secrets to ourselves as counselors and therapists. So a lot of the motivational interviewing skills can be learned by family members to help motivate their loved ones. And one really helpful and useful way to begin that shift for family members from trying to change the behavior of their loved one to looking at, well, what can I do differently? Is looking at, well, what have you done in the past? And from the craft approaches, they have lovely, worksheets just like this. What have you already done? And family members have tried a whole bunch of reasonable, logical, rational things to try to get their loved one to change their gambling behaviors. They've worked really hard and done everything they can think of. They've reasoned with them. They've given them the silent treatment. They've pleaded and begged. They've complained or nagged. They've gotten angry and yelled or gotten angry and become quiet or passive. They've gotten angry and become physical and aggressive and hit or thrown things. I've sat and moped, hoping my loved one would notice how distressing their gambling behavior is. I've insisted that they get treatment. I've threatened. I've spent my money irresponsibly. If you're going to blow the money gambling, I'll blow it spending. I'll get another 10 pair of new shoes. Extreme reaction, threatening divorce or suicide as a result of the gambling. I'll go gambling with them to try to at least have fun myself or control it on the spot. I've paid off the debts and been the responsible one to reduce the financial pressures. So how often have you done that, and what's been the result? Does doing this get you what you want? It's a very pragmatic, non-judgmental approach. Does that work? Do they change their gambling behaviors? Do they stay home more? Do they take better care of the family's member? Has any of this stuff worked? If it's working, great. Let's build on that. Let's do more of it. Let's strengthen that. If it hasn't been working, just doing bigger, better, more of that isn't going to make it work better. So let's creatively think together about what other things you might try that might be helpful. We don't know. We'll monitor. But at least let's try something different and be more creative about it rather than continuing to do the same things that don't work to make anything better and maybe even make things worse, including how you're feeling about yourself. And just some quotes here that focus on forgiveness and non-judgmentalness. We can recognize that the offender or the person with the gambling disorder is a valuable human being who struggles with the same needs, pressures, and confusions that we all struggle with. We'll recognize that the gambling behavior really may not have been about us in the first place. Instead, it was about the person with the gambling disorder's misguided attempt to meet his or her own needs. As we regard our loved one with a gambling problem from this point of view, regardless of whether they repent and regardless of what they've done or suffered, we'll be in a position to forgive them. Not condone the gambling behavior, not just let it continue, but work towards a place of deeper understanding and forgiveness so that we decrease our own suffering, regardless of what our loved one chooses to do. And that really fits in with the approach from the craft strategy of understanding better the role of gambling in your loved one's life. And looking at motivation and triggers, the external and the internal triggers. Not to control your loved one's behavior, but to feel more empowered in understanding that behavior better. And like it said in the quote, realizing it's not about us. It's not about how much our loved one cares about us or the family. It's about what this gambling is about for them, and the fact that it may be meeting some really important needs that we haven't quite understood. And maybe even our loved one doesn't understand that well. Who is your loved one with when they gamble? Not so you can call that person up and yell at them because they're helping your loved one continue to gamble, but what does that mean? Is that camaraderie? Is that a way of feeling connected with old buddies, of being respected, of being recognized? Where do they usually gamble? When does your loved one usually gamble? So I can begin to understand the patterns, not to disrupt them necessarily, but to have a sense of what's going on. That's why they're trying to get out of the house. That's why they're picking an argument. I don't have to play that game. I don't have to bite on that hook. What do you think your loved one is thinking about right before they're gambling? What do you think your loved one is feeling right before they're gambling? They're angry. They've had a bad day at work. Oh, they do that to deal with their anger. Okay, I get it. That makes some sense. You know? They're thinking about how we're so behind on our bills, and this is the only way out because they can't work another full-time job. So we're beginning to help our loved ones get a grip on this situation, not to control it, but to feel more in control of themselves with that deeper understanding. Behaviors make sense worksheet. And, I just love these worksheets for family members. So, what do you think the reasons for your loved one's gambling is? What basic needs do you think they're meeting? And we can, have a list of basic needs: a need to feel relief from stress, a need to express anger and vent and get some relief from that anger, a need to feel recognized, a need to feel that I'm with people who approve of me no matter what, who don't judge me. A lot of the common reasons why people may gamble. A need to feel hope that I can have enough money to get out of this dead-end job, to get out of poverty, whatever those may be. Do you think your loved one has ever considered any alternative ways of meeting those needs? Have they ever tried any other ways of meeting those needs in other situations? What do you see as some alternatives? So helping the family members know what they might start reinforcing. If your loved one mentions any of those alternatives, reinforcing that and recognizing when they can reinforce that there are other ways to meet some of those basic needs. And using that to behavioral analysis to realize that there's ambivalence. And we can work with family members to do this cost-benefit analysis, okay? For example, your loved one may have mixed feelings about why they might want to continue gambling and why they might want to change their gambling behavior. And you can think about that when you think about something that you've tried to change in your life. We're all the same. We all want to feel better and not struggle and suffer. That's human nature. So maybe you've tried to exercise more, or change your eating habits, or take time for more reading, or go for more walks, or get angry less. And think about the reasons or the benefits for that change. and what effort you'd have to put into it, or any reasons not to change, and appreciate your own ambivalence. How did that seesaw go for you? Oh, well, I want to eat more fruits and vegetables and eat less meat. And then I see an ad for Burger King on TV, and I really want a hamburger, and I know how good it would taste. And on a good day, I can keep myself from doing it. But when I've had a bad day, and you can appreciate that ambivalence. I want to eat healthier, but I love the taste of that Burger King Whopper or that bag of potato chips or whatever it is. So we can get family members in touch with, oh, yeah, I get it. It works the same way for me. How can I help my loved one with putting a bit more weight on that benefit side? You know, what might work better? How can I support them in their own motivation for change? Realizing that they do have that motivation, as well as the motivation not to have to put in the effort or not to lose the benefits. So, how can we align ourselves with our loved one's own motivation? Just as we as counselors align ourselves with our clients' motivation and appreciate where they're at and appreciate how we can help them. We can teach family members the same recognition, the same understanding, and the same skills. What do you think your loved one likes about the people they gamble with? What do you think your loved one likes about the places? What does that do for them? Is it fun? Is it exciting? Is it relaxing? Is it non-judgmental and accepting? What do you think they like about how they feel when they're gambling? So we're really deepening that appreciation, not to make the harmful gambling okay. And, you know, we have to make sure family members are hearing that. This isn't to say you just have to live with it. But understanding is power. Knowledge is power. So the more we can understand, the more we can create a space where change may be more likely to happen. And we may feel more ease and less suffering. We can detach ourselves with care more. And not detached by shutting down our love and our feelings, detached by not clinging to our own pain and suffering, and we can release that the more we understand the situation. What do you think are the negative or distressing results of your loved one as a result of gambling in each of these areas? What do you think they're aware of? So what are you aware of in terms of how the gambling is impacting relationships, their physical health, your physical health, the emotional well-being of them and the family, their work, school? And which of those that you're aware of do you think they would agree with you on? That's a good starting point. They really know that this is doing harm to our finances, but they don't see any other way out. That's the ambivalence. Okay, we're back to ambivalence. How can we help our loved one resolve that? And let me take a break here. I see there are some chats, so let me check in and see if there may be any questions that have come up. All right. Okay, yes, the slides will be available, and I don't see any specific questions, but feel free to type in questions as I forge ahead here. So let me kind of take a little bit of a side path here and just talk about language, which is another one of my favorite topics. And stigmatizing language can apply not only to those who have a gambling disorder, but can also apply to those who are in relationship with someone with a gambling disorder. And some of our traditional language in terms of talking about those in relationship with somebody with an addiction can feel stigmatizing and shaming. For example, problem gambling is caused by flaws in character and genetics. Your partner is powerless to control, and you are powerless to help. So these are loaded words. And family members may believe and have absorbed from social messages and societal messages that the gambling is caused by flaws inherent in this person's character and genetics. So it can be helpful for us to demythologize those and talk about a biopsychosocial spiritual perspective of what may be the causes and conditions that can put somebody at risk, at higher risk for disordered gambling, and powerlessness, and sorting that out. While somebody is in the midst of gambling, they may be very little power to control their gambling in the middle of an episode, but they are empowered to do a whole lot of other things to decide how to respond to their urges to gamble or their behavior that leads to out of control gambling. And while I may be powerless, I may not be able to control my loved one's behavior, I have a whole lot of power to be more helpful to myself and my family, including the individual with the gambling problem. So differentiating that what I have power and I'm empowered to accomplish and what things I don't have control over. Your partner's reluctance or trouble in deciding not to gamble or how to control their gambling is evidence of their denial rather than natural ambivalence. So here's where ambivalence comes in. Denial is like a dead end word. You're in denial. Okay, I'm in denial. Now what? Well, get out of denial. Well, how do I do that? We can work with ambivalence. We can understand it. We can shift the balance. We can, do a whole lot of work around ambivalence. Denial is this all or nothing kind of phenomena that somebody just has to stop doing. I don't find it a very helpful concept. It's a label to blame somebody for their ambivalence rather than to help them be empowered to resolve it. Attempts by you to help are enabling. That is, involvement on your part is actually helping them to keep gambling. You will often get the message that any love or kindness toward a partner who has a gambling problem is enabling. And I think this is the danger of that word. It doesn't help reinforce recovery-oriented behaviors, any behavior in the desire of a more healthy, loving family environment. So being nice to somebody who's still gambling can be seen as problematic when it isn't. Reinforcing ongoing gambling behaviors and not allowing natural consequences may not get you where you want to be going, but being kind or compassionate to somebody who's suffering with their addiction is not enabling. So making that differentiation. The recommended path is to detach with love or to force compliance lovingly, have an intervention, kidnap them into treatment, essentially, as I see interventions. And detaching can mean disconnecting. And as Johann Hadari says in his book, Lost Connections, addiction is a disease of disconnectedness. So we don't want to disconnect from people who have a gambling problem. We want to stay connected in a more helpful way, keep our hearts open. And that is an incredibly difficult thing to do. And family members will need a great deal of compassionate support to be able to do that very difficult work. Okay. And so a lot of strength is needed to do this work. The weak can never forgive. Forgiveness is the attribute of the strong. So forgiveness isn't a sign of weakness, it's a sign of emotional strength. I have to feel pretty strong in my capacity to be vulnerable in order to be forgiving. So we have to help family members really generate that sense of compassionate strength. And I'm seeing some more chats here and hands raised, so let's see what we got. An uptick in gambling since COVID. You know, I don't know that anybody's been doing that data gathering. I hope they have. I haven't seen those studies yet. I think in New Jersey, where there's been legalized online gambling for a long time, they have seen an uptick in online gambling. And we haven't even talked about the impact of seclusion and stay at home and isolation and unemployment and increased economic issues and evictions that may be coming. When we throw that into the pot on top of overwhelming problems that these families are dealing with from the get-go, and there have been some things that have kind of kept things in place, but now we're moving into chronic stress, chronic isolation, ongoing exacerbation of financial problems. So the gambling problems have not gone away for some people. And around the country I've heard, well, they closed down the casinos, so my client said, well, I don't need you right now. But there's going to be pent up demand once those reopen, even if people feel like, oh, I got this licked. It changes immediately when that resource is now available once again. Yeah, profound damage to the family. And forgiveness isn't necessarily, so your loved one can have an easier life. Forgiveness is really very selfish. So I can have a more liberated life, freed from the toxic nature of holding on to resentments and anger and those things. But it's simple but not easy. A long road, and some don't want to pursue it. Absolutely. Some people, feel the need to hold on to their anger and their bitterness and their wanting revenge like a shield, because it feels so scary to even think about being emotionally vulnerable again. And that's why, we have to help these family members feel strong in and of themselves. And as we talk about compassion, developing what is often called the fierce compassion, or I like to think of it as the firm hand of compassion, with compassion having two sides, kind of the gentle hand of compassion that we often think about, but also the firm or fierce hand of compassion that can say, no, I'm not going to financially rescue you from this difficult situation. I'm going to love you enough and love myself enough to be able to say no and stick to it, even though I see you suffering greatly and my heart bleeds for you. So yeah, very, very difficult things that take a lot of support and practice. Yeah, let me see some raised hands or questions, no open questions. And Robbie, I don't know if you can see
Yeah,
who has hands
sure.
raised, and maybe we can
Yeah,
give
yeah.
them.
I can get to, let me try the first one here. Angelica has her hand raised, so let's see if this works. Angelica, can you talk? Hello? Let me try Andrea. We'll go to our next one. Let's see here. Okay, Andrea? Oh, hold
She
on.
looks muted still.
Yeah.
Maybe you need to unmute yourself, Andrea.
Okay, and I will try for Brenda.
Hello.
Yes, hello. Hello?
Thought I heard something.
I did too. Let me try again for Brenda.
And maybe if we can't give you a voice, you can chat in
Right.
whatever you wanted to say.
Yep. Sorry, folks. For some reason, I had someone a couple of times there and I lost them. It might have been Angelica, actually. Let me try one more time. And if not, yeah, try to chat us. Perhaps we can get to you that way. Okay. Thank you.
Great. So, that kind of brings us to mindful self-care. And as some of you may realize, I love working from a mindfulness-based perspective, both with somebody with a gambling disorder and their family members. So it can be really empowering to begin using mindfulness-based practices to begin being present for myself. I've been so focused on my loved one and meeting their needs, or dealing with the problems that they bring into the family, and making sure everybody else in the family is okay, that I haven't paid much attention to myself. So beginning to help family members notice what's going on for them, and developing a safe space within myself, this holding environment where I can hold all of the emotions and feelings that are going on, recognizing, how what I'm experiencing is either helped or hindered by the stories and the thoughts I'm thinking. Am I repeating the same old, that rotten, no good son of a gun story? Does it help me get what I want? Again, without judging it, just noticing when you tell yourself that story again, that we all do. We're all storytellers, amazing storytellers in our minds. And we have some favorite stories, and we love those episodes over and over and over again, and in some perverted way take comfort from them. Either I'm going to say this and I'm going to find these magic words, and these words are really going to be the ones that help my loved one change. Does it ever work? And how does it feel? How do we begin noticing? Oh, my stomach starts churning when I tell myself that story. My jaw gets tense. I start getting a headache. I start getting a lump in my throat. I start feeling all these signs of physical distress. Let me feel into that and learn how to be with that and release the unhelpful story, and just pay attention to how can I bring some soothing and comfort to this pain, this distress, this suffering. The story wasn't doing it. It was just adding to my suffering. But I can be with and create a different kind of space where there's softening and loosening and untying and letting go and release. that really helps me treat myself more kindly and more gently. So that's where the self-compassion practice is. This is a moment of suffering. I recognize that. I'm not ignoring it. I'm not pushing it away. And I can befriend myself. I can treat myself like I would my dearest friend, with comforting and support and not judging and not letting that inner critic take over, with loving kindness and realizing I'm not alone. Other people feel the same kind of pain. You know, I'm not the most shameful person for being in relationship with this person who's struggling with their gambling disorder. And managing difficult feelings. You know, what are my triggers? You know, what does my loved one do that triggers my rage, my fear, my anxiety? And what's my usual response? Is it helpful? Are there any alternatives that I can use in response to that trigger that won't lead to a knockdown, drag out argument, yelling and screaming that the kids just cringe at? You know, any way that I can use my courageous, compassionate honesty to deal better with the situation. How difficult would that be? If I pick that alternative, what are the likely consequences? Are they better or worse than my original reaction? Attack is an easier response than forgiveness, and that's why we're so tempted to give into it. Throughout our lives, we've seen more anger than examples of true forgiveness. We don't have models for how not to respond with anger. You know, we either, I like to call it, I either go into my armadillo mode and curl up in my protective ball with my armor all around me, or into my fire-breathing dragon. It's taken a lot of practice to realize that there's some place that's not even on that continuum. And it often takes me days of sitting mindfully to figure out what that courageous, compassionate, honest approach is in dealing with people I'm closest to. So true forgiveness, true understanding, true compassion, with at least equal measures for myself and the other person. And just some helpful things. Sometimes it's best to keep my mouth shut. So knowing when to stop or go. For example, I'd like to talk to you about protecting our money in case you gamble more than you had planned. Green lights would be if the response is okay, but can you listen to my feelings about this without getting angry? That's opening the door with some contingencies that are reasonable. Sure, as long as I have a say in what we agree to. Well, that's reasonable. Green light. I've been thinking about that too. Thanks for bringing it up. Red lights. You already hide all your money from me. What more do you want? Not ready for this conversation. Or ready for an argument rather than a conversation. Don't give me that gammon on crap. I'm not like all those bums in GA. Okay, not a good time. You're always trying to control me. Well, that's right into that. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. Argument. Okay, maybe we can have this talk another time. So knowing how not to just increase your frustration. We've talked about teaching motivational interviewing skills, you know, open-ended questions, giving lots of affirmations, active listening, asking permission, don't impose, allowing disagreements. So we can engage in those skills and, you know, emphasizing, be brief, don't go on hour-long rants. Be positive, point out what's working well, what you appreciate, be specific, not generalize, you always. Labeling my feelings clearly without attributing those feelings or making it sound like the other is responsible for your feelings. Offer understanding as a starting point. accept any place in a conflict where I have some responsibility and offer, I want to be helpful here. How can I best do that? Lying, and I know we're running out of time, so for another day, how to deal with lying. And certainly labeling somebody a liar isn't the best way of doing it. We all lie. One study said at least 3 times a day. And how can we behave in ways that increase our partner's motivation to feel safe and comfortable being honest? And realizing that there may be no way we know. Talking about beforehand, how can I let you know if I'm not sure you're being honest? What's the best way for you to hear that? So talk about it before it happens, so you know this is what we can do if we don't think the other is being as honest as we would like. And how can I listen to honesty when I don't like that honesty, when that honesty makes me afraid or angry or sad? How can I still accept that honesty and reinforce the person for being honest, even though it's painful to hear that honesty? So reinforcing honesty, just notice, I appreciate your being honest, even though it's really hard for me to hear that. Can we take a break so I can just kind of settle my emotions down and respond to you in a more appropriate way? It's more difficult to challenge the honesty or have consequences for lying. How can I express my feelings without coming across as being punitive or judgmental? And we can talk about that ahead of time. Start by agreeing what the partner can do to demonstrate. So if you want me to believe you, it would help if you brought receipts home. It would help if you're late for you to call me, if you're going to be more than 10 minutes late, whatever those are. And reinforcing recovery-oriented behaviors. Promote positive recovery-oriented behaviors with positive outcomes, and allow problematic or harmful behaviors to have their own negative consequences. Forgiveness is not always easy. At times it feels more painful than the wound we suffered, to forgive the one that inflicted it. And yet there's no peace without forgiveness. Attack thoughts towards others are attack thoughts towards ourselves. The first step in forgiveness is the willingness to forgive. So what can we do to reward recovery-oriented behavior? Somebody is spending time at home rather than going to the casino. Do we say, well, you were at the casino last night, and even though you're home tonight, I'm not going to talk to you? That's not reinforcing the fact that they're home playing with the kids. Spend time with them doing something fun other than gambling. Go for a walk. Talk about topics other than gambling that they enjoy. Prepare a favorite meal. Give a shoulder rub. Watch a TV show or movie that they want to watch. Praise. Give affirmations. Give a little card. I really enjoyed that evening, that walk. I appreciate the effort you're making. Get involved in an activity they enjoy. And this one may take some time, and offer to engage in their favorite sexual activity. That may not be the first thing on the reward list. And things not to do, all the things that we talked about early on, the nagging, the cold shoulder, all those things that tend not to work to get us what we want. And how can I reward myself? And list things. What is a way I can care for myself that I haven't been doing? And plan on that. Program that in. Make sure I do that. What are some barriers? I've never done that. I don't have permission. I don't have enough money. I don't have the time. I don't know how. I don't deserve. And then we can work through those barriers and those obstacles and those counter arguments that folks may have to get them to a place where they feel okay about trying this new way of relating to themselves. And a very powerful exercise is this, you can work with a couple to sit across from each other and just have one person think towards the other. Just like me, this person was once an infant, crying and screaming to get their needs met. Just like me, this person was once a child trying to make friends and learn how to walk, and falling down and scraping knees and getting back up. And just like me, this person was once a teenager wanting their friends to like them and be approved of and figure out who they are in this world. And just like me, this person was an adult trying to meet their needs, have relationships, be loved and to love, be heard and to hear. And just like me, this person is just trying to figure out this crazy world on fire and to reduce their suffering and to bring some joy into their lives. So we begin to help family members understand that we all have the same basic needs, and we're all trying to figure out how to get those needs met, sometimes well, sometimes not so well, and how can we help each other do that. Forgiveness doesn't mean that we suppress anger. Forgiveness means that we've asked for a miracle, the ability to see through mistakes that someone has made to the truth that lies in all of our hearts. And just some resources from the craft perspective, some great manuals, 20-minute guide for partners of those with addictive disorders, a nice manual from a VA resource on this approach to working with couples, and on the National Council on Problem Gambling's website, some downloadable books on financial strategies for loved ones. Although they're a little bit hardcore, so you have to be careful with those. And thank you so much for your kind attention. Forgiveness is not an occasional act. It's a permanent attitude. So may we all be very forgiving with ourselves as well as with those we love. Thank you so much.
And
I
thank
know
you,
I'm over
Dr.
time.
Rugle. No, you're fine. Thank you very much. And I have to say, and I'm going to say you're a rock star. We hit 125 participants today, and that's okay. You ran over that was great material. And if people had to log off, that was okay. I just they had some meetings, but other things. But that was a great talk, and thank you. And I liked how you rolled in forgiveness, and you even positioned money at the first of this, because that is such an issue and it can become dangerous with working with the family. So thank you for doing that. There were, if you've got a quick second,
Sure.
there was a couple questions there at the end, and thank you everybody. And please tune in next July 9th with Dr. Paul Lanier. He'll be speaking on ACEs. You can go to the UNC Behavioral Health website to register. But it was they were talking about the casinos closing during COVID, and what families have been doing and how they've been doing it, because although it might be some unhealthy coping skills going to the casinos to handle their stress, have you run into that with your practice work?
Yeah, I mean, from what I gather, it's just, as with most things all over the place, some families are just relieved and they're, able to kind of feel back to normal because, the casino issue is gone. With other families, because the gambling is gone, the emotions that the gambling was covering are coming up. So there's been, increased anxiety or conflict or arguing or even violence in some families. And then the issue has been often for people doing this work online that there's no confidentiality. Some people are living in tight quarters. and they can't have an online session because the family members will hear, you know, and even really gut-wrenching things where you hear the yelling, you know, and it may be a young person back home because of the virus, and you can hear the parents yelling and screaming in the background. And the intimacy, you become a part of that family because you're invited into the home in this way. So there are all these different dynamics going on that can intensify, you know, the interaction for the client, but also for the counselor. And we have to take care of ourselves.
Yeah.
There's just more exhaustion, and especially when we're working with families in that intensity, in this modality where we're trying to lean in and get all the information we used to get face to face. So also a really important time to take care of ourselves in this environment. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, we've got, and I've even talked on that too, because it definitely intensifies in the different pathways that you just talked about. So thank you for that. And slide availability, again, guys, will be on the UNC Behavioral Health website. I, again, would like to thank Dr. Rugle for her talk today. And someone's asking about going back to the resource slides. You'll have the slides, again, on the UNC Behavioral Health Springboard website. Thank you, Dr. Rugle, and you have a great day. Everyone who was on the call, we want to thank you. So
stay safe and take really good care. You're necessary. You're essential.
Thank you. All right. Thanks again.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.